Welcome. We are here in Modem in the Helmut Newton show, Private Property. It's 3 parts actually, but everything goes together finally. It's 15 pictures each of each suite. It's 45 in total, of course. So, and we see black and white photography, especially black and white photography here. Of course, he worked in color photography too, but this is the early photography from the 70s and 80s, the early 80s. So he compiled everything in 84 for the suits. So bringing it onto the art market actually in boxes, and 3 boxes, therefore suite number 1, 2, and 3. If we pick out one photograph, this is number 4 of this sequences. So he gave the order, and we just follow the order. We see here a beautiful woman with a man in front of her, and we see in the back a group of people with a film camera. And this is quite funny because we might think that this is about a shooting, a film shooting. And as we can see, the fashion, let's say, of the time, it's the late 70s, and we are suddenly reminded of the film noir, which was there in Paris. Of course, this is a Paris photograph, or shot there. And so we think about Godard, Truffaut, Louis Malle, and all the others. And this might be the director. And these are the 2 actors, an actress and an actor. Actually, it's all fake. Actually, it's just set. It's a mise en scène. It's Newton did the scenery, and it's all about this jewelry. It's a fashion photograph. So, but Newton was doing several times, or probably mostly, much more than just a fashion photograph. This would be just too less for him. He was telling stories. This kind of narrative is he's quite famous for. You know, that there's as well something else. It could be a criminal story. It could be a film scene. It could be quotes from other films, and so on. So it's much, much more than just a fashion photograph. If you flip to the pages of the fashion magazines by then and today, you are thinking of astonishing things, you know. And this is very astonishing. Flipping to the page, you know, and then you see that and say, wow, this is a film still. No, it isn't. It's just a fashion photograph. And then there on the side, there's his name, and then you can see this is probably Bulgari or whatever, Van Cleef Arpels. And so this is a very unusual idea to focus fashion within this framework. We have other pictures where he is making a very nice and interesting contrast, like this one, as well here in suite number 1. So he's photographing a woman wearing a dress, and it's of course again about this dress. It's not about her, it's not about the surrounding, but what she's doing here is, what he is doing here is the combination of the beauty and the death. So it's eros and thanatos. It's a huge, important topic in art history. So he's just quoting this idea for this fashion shot again. So there's always a little bit darkness in his work. I mean, even if it's sunlight, but it's actually dark clothes, the black and white, strong contrast, you know, in this photograph. But again, the darkness of the death. And of course the myth, and you know, the bodies and the heads and so on, holding the head here, holding the breasts here. So it's an incredible contrast between the dress, the model, and the scenery. So he was doing fashion photographs, especially in the 70s in Paris, where he lived from 1961 onwards. But later on he went to New York in the 70s as well, and then in the 80s he was taking portraits and and starting as well with his nude photography. And if we go around the corner, then you have here within the exhibition rooms suite number 2. And so if we go on and see one very famous iconic shot of his photograph here it's about a dress again. You won't believe it, but it's the same case actually. This photograph has a title, Self-Portrait with Wife and Women. It's actually there are 2 women. It's not 1, 2. It's here you see the legs of the second one. He was photographing. He's standing in front of a mirror, photographing himself into a mirror, and the model, the naked model, from behind, and into the face, like the recto verso situation, and especially his wife here on the side. As you know, this is a 6x6 photograph, so he's using the Hasselblad camera or the Rolleiflex, looking from up into the lens, and so he was actually hidden by the camera or looking into the camera. He's the only one you can't see actually, and it reminds you of the Las Meninas of Velázquez and all the others. So he was quoting not only Eros Thanatos' idea, quoting film, it was as well quoting sometimes art history directly or subtly. And the clue here is it's all about fashion, because he was asked and he was commissioned by Italian Men's Vogue to cover as an editorial raincoats. So he agreed and said, okay, I do it if I do my own raincoats. It's very funny actually. And so he includes his wife. She plays a kind of an editor-in-chief. She did not know about the whole frame. She did not know that she was in the frame, but she was around, and you can see this as well in the film we screen here as well in Modem. It's a film called Helmut by June, 53 minutes. It's a beautiful, funny thing. You can see she was around, she was involved, and yeah, it's fantastic. It's really great to see and really funny. So we have always portraits in this selection and in his work, of course. This is Paloma Picasso, and she wears her own fashion, so the jewelry she designed. So it's sometimes you see her as well naked. So in these other works, you have all the 3 parts: the nude, the fashion, and the portrait. And this is just 2 aspects. It's about fashion, her fashion, and it's about her. So she is a very famous person. Today we would call her an it girl, but in these years she was doing something. She was not only the daughter of Pablo Picasso. She was a jewelry designer, and you can see it here that Helmut Newton photographed her with the flowers, with this kind of sensitiveness, and her jewelry especially exposed, through this kind of manner. Maybe. So much more portraits he took, not only in Paris, but later on as well in southern France at the Côte d'Azur, where he lived, especially in Monte Carlo, where he lived from 1981 onwards. So he left Paris for Monte Carlo because he was not willing to pay taxes anymore. So he was writing about that very frankly in his autobiography, and it's very funny to read that as well. So he photographed David Bowie in Monte Carlo in 1982, and this is a very special composition. Normally he came to the set with a complete ready idea, finished idea in his head, how to photograph a certain person. And I guess in this case it was a similar thing. So he was putting him on the side. Actually it's a 2-part image. He was on the side, and the other side is just showing architecture, but a kind of a jail architecture. So he was actually there coming out from a special clinic, so he was. We see something about him. Doing portraits, it's something about the photographer and something about the person. You know, if the person is very famous, you know, and you see him, you recognize him, that's him. But it's always a little bit more than is a kind of an interpretation of the person. You know, this is a very important point. You know, that you're seeing a portrait and then just thinking who was doing the portrait, because you see a lot of aspects, you know, about the photographer. A portrait of a photographer is as well always a tiny little part of the self-portrait. Again, you see something about the film idea here again. You know, you see the film situation, then the dress, and then other models, and then this black man here. Normally, if a man appears within the frame, his frames, if it's a portrait, it's something else. You know, then it's a real portrait. It's just about him, concentrating on him, on his habits, and so on. But in this case, if a man person, you know, if a male person is within the framework here, he's just a prop. He's just an extra. He's not important. He's just a shadow. You know, she is important, and they are too. But she is the main person, the main character. She is more or less the actress, and we see the camera here. And of course, this is not happening by accident. That the shadow here is exactly this way, you know, coming because the light is coming from here. This is her again, you know, and it's not interfering here, and so on. So everything is completely, perfectly, precisely set. And then you see finally there are some chains, you know, here, and this then becomes a kind of a strange story, you know, and there's always something strange within it, you know. There's always something additional, you know. That we are kind of wondering, you know, what's up there? What happens there? What's wrong? What's real? You know, and we are not completely sure where reality starts and fiction ends, and vice versa. You know, and it's all about mise en scène. It's all about the setting here. So suite number 3. Is you see a little bit more nudity. It starts in the 80s, so he was doing, this is Sylvia Gobbel again. She is as well in the picture self-portrait Wife and Women, wearing again these incredible high heels. You're not only able to walk on these, just probably stay on that. So he was going to a shoemaker and doing these shoes for him, and then sometimes you see that the models their feet were a little bit too small, and normally a fashion photographer has to hide that, has to avoid that to show it. But he, on contrary, he showed it, and these kind of sometimes it's juxtaposition, sometimes it's exaggeration, and sometimes it's these kind of false things, these mistakes he built into the fashion system. You know, this is very interesting to see it finally. And then we have this kind of idea of the men's and man-women interaction. Actually, it's very interesting to see a photograph like this, because it's caused a scandal in 1975, published in American Vogue. This is part of the story of O. A very nice story on, I guess, 20 pages in American Vogue. Without any words, it's just pictures, picture after picture. Of course it's about the dress, but again here he tells a story. It's about the examination of a man through a woman. You know, it's a woman examining man is the title of the work, photographed and published in 1975, and this was at least very unusual. In other words, it was completely naughty how she sits, how she looks at the man, and the man with the cut-off hat. I mean, then the head is just coming up here. So he is changing the roles for her, for the women in general. So this was a very individual and very unusual way to make a photograph like this. So then we have Sie kommen, they are coming, or here they come. This is the naked version. There is a dressed version as well, published in French Vogue and photographed, commissioned by French Vogue. And it's funny because this is the second part of a fashion photograph, and it was published as a fashion photograph. I mean, they are naked. I mean, but he founded this idea of the naked and dressed in Brescia first in Italy, and published in Italian Vogue in October 81, and this was published in November 81 in French Vogue. And this is a very famous photograph, which is as well printed life-size and hang in our foundation, you know, since the very beginning, and just auctioned now at Sotheby's $1.8 million. This is an incredible price if you remember that it was just shot for French Vogue. It was just made for a magazine, for a fashion magazine. It's a big success. You know, it's of course now posthumously, but we are very happy that we can support this through our work, through the work of the foundation. And we are 15 years old, and we are going on, and we bring exhibitions out to other places, to other venues, like here in Debrecen.